Welcome to Apologetics and Prophecy, the official podcast of Calvary Solid Ground, a remnant church in Orangevale, California. I am Pastor Jed, and I will be your host as we bring you Bible studies and updates put through an apologetical and biblical lens to see just how close we are to the return of our Lord. Thank you for joining us today. Maranatha, everyone. So glad that you could join us again for this Monday edition of Apologetics and Prophecy. And I want to thank you for tuning in today. I know the hours and the times have been different that I put it on there. I was trying to do the live stream where it doesn't coincide with other people, but that doesn't seem to be working, so we might just keep it at noon. But anyway, I just want to thank you to all of you that have been watching this program faithfully, and the few of you that have really been giving me a lot of positive comments and have actually been learning from it. And I really appreciate that because it really helps me when I'm going through the study and trying to decide where we're going to go next and praying about it and searching the scriptures. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's been an interesting study. We've been doing Build Back Babylon, and of course, according to the scriptures, and we've come all the way to the point of the New Testament. So the question today is we're actually coming to the place we're going to be parking for quite a while. Now, I am going to be gone on a trip between October 8th and the 20th. So there's going to be a few weeks where there is no podcast available or because I'm going to be out of the country. And this is a DIY project. I do all of this myself. So we'll pick it back up when I get back. But I thought that I might be able to finish it, but there's just too much here. Especially when we're talking about Revelation 17 and 18, it would be reckless for me to run through it and try to finish it. So we're going to go through a couple weeks, and then, it will just keep going till I'm gone, and then we'll do a review when I get back and pick right back up in it. But really, chapters 17 and 18 are very interesting chapters in Revelation because it's right at the end of the last bowl. Judgment has been poured out, and it's right before the second coming of Christ that when God is remembering Babylon, that he's giving us a description about two things that are very important for us to look at, and they have a lot of Old Testament references in them. And we're going to have to ask ourselves the question, is it literal, figurative, allegorical, or what? What's going on here with these two chapters in Revelation that are, very parenthetical, but they're dealing with something very important that I think is important for us to understand what it is. And of course, we do not take an allegorical view of the scriptures, but we're just throwing it out there because a lot of people have, because of the figurative language being used in Revelation 17 and 18. So we're just going to go ahead and pick it up and remind ourselves about the book of Revelation, and that we have to remember the book of Revelation expects you to have a working knowledge of the Old Testament. There are over 400 references to different places in the Old Testament in the book of Revelation. And it's so important that we know. You have to be a Bible student in order to understand the book of Revelation. And we know that at the beginning of the book of Revelation, that we are told in the book of Revelation in chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. And he sent it and signified it, or signified it, by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ and to all things that he saw. And so this revelation of Jesus Christ that Jesus gives to John, and it's given to John. Let's get back here. That Jesus gave to John and signified it or signified it by his angel to John. And so there are signs, there are symbols, there are figurative languages talking about a literal futuristic thing that was going to happen. And we have to understand that Bible prophecy is that way. And so that shouldn't surprise us when we get to Revelation 17, where we're at today. In Revelation 17, verses 1 and 2, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." So, John is given this message from one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, and said to him, "Hey, I'm going to show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Now, we know later on we'll see that many waters is the nations and peoples of the world. So it's language talking about the many waters, and that, remember, the first beast came out of the sea of humanity. That's what you have to remember. That, like I said, it's signified, and these things are important for us to see. But we have to understand there's a judgment coming for a great harlot, and we'll talk about that in a minute, who sits on many waters, which we know is the sea of humanity, right? With whom the kings of the earth, these kings that run different kingdoms of the earth, have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So we're going to come back to that to describe that. But the first thing that before we get back to that, because it'll all make sense before we leave today, but you have to understand there's a great harlot committing fornication with all the kings of the world and all the sea of humanity. She's sitting on the sea of humanity, and all the inhabitants of the earth are drunk from the fornication or harlotry, which the Bible describes, and we'll talk about in a minute. But it goes on something very interesting that we need to pick up on, because we picked up on it before on our way here. So we need to look at it and review it again, because it's here in the scripture. And that is verse 3. 17 verse 3 says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, and having 7 heads and 10 horns." So we already know, and we'll get into that, because the chapter will describe itself about the scarlet beast that has the 7 heads and 10 horns. We've talked about that before. We know that's the beast kingdom. The scarlet woman, the woman sitting on the beast, the scarlet beast, the woman sitting on the beast is not the Antichrist kingdom. This is the woman that sits on it, and we'll figure that out in a minute. But notice that it's the spirit. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and he saw a woman. The wilderness and woman. Now remember, it's very interesting, because that takes us back to the book of Zechariah, which was a post-exilic book, which happened after Babylon was conquered by the Medes and the Persians, which show that there's still a future for Babylon, which points to this chapter here. But I find it very interesting. If you didn't know, the name Zechariah means Jehovah remembers. Jehovah remembers. And it's very interesting that the first thing that we see after the 7th bowl is poured out, the judgment of this harlot that the angel, one of the angels with the 7 bowls, tells John, and it refers to Zechariah, which is Jehovah remembers. And remember, our last episode dealt with Revelation 16:17, and great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So I think, Jehovah remembers, God remembering, all of these things is you have to remember, it's not that God forgets, but it's important for us to remember now Zechariah, which is interesting, because Zechariah is prophesying about the nation of Israel and how God will not forget her and the kingdom that is coming. And it deals with her history. You get all the way to chapter 14 and you deal with the visions of the history of the Jews. And that's where we get a lot of our timeline of what will happen to Israel in the 7-year tribulation period, the 70th week of Daniel. So the fact that Jehovah remembers Israel, but Jehovah also remembers Babylon, and it's tucked in the middle of this book, Jehovah remembers, or Zechariah, is this one vision that we're going to review right now. And of course, that is from Zechariah 5 through 11. And then it says, "Then the angel who talked with me came out and said to me," now notice it's an angel, right? Same thing as one of the, is this the same angel? Could be. Lift up your eyes now and see what this is that goes forth. What this is that goes forth. So I asked, what is it? And he said to me, it is a basket that is going forth. He also said, this is their resemblance throughout the earth. Here is a lead disc lifted up, and this is a woman sitting in the basket. And remember, this is an ephah basket, a measuring basket, which we'll deal with more when we get to 18 of Revelation. But then it goes on to say this. Then he said, this is wickedness. And he thrust her down into the basket and threw the lead cover over its mouth. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were two women coming with the wind in their wings, and they had wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth. So I said to the angel who talked with me, where are they carrying the basket? And he said to me, to build a house for it in the land of Shinar, which is Babylon. When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base. And so, that's one of those things that we looked at and we talked about before, why we believe that somehow or another the city of Babylon will be rebuilt, whether it's in the process of being rebuilt, which I kind of believe is the way that it'll work, because I don't think we have 30 years before for a complete city to be built, but it could be in the process. Look at how fast Dubai and Abu Dhabi and these other Arab-run cities have built so fast, skyscrapers and all of this stuff they did in the middle of the desert, in no time at all. And so we can't think that it's not possible for it to be done in a short period of time. It is possible. And then when it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base, and we'll come back to the basket. But obviously the wilderness, where he sees the woman is called wickedness, stuffed in this basket. That's a basket of economic measure, and step there for a time in the future, carried away for a time in the future, which John is being carried away now into the wilderness to see this woman and this description of the woman. And as we continue on in Revelation, because it says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, just like Zechariah was, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, not in the basket anymore, but on the beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So this woman will be out of the basket riding in on this Antichrist kingdom, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's move on to verse 4. Verse 4 says, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of the abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. So these are all symbols of prosperity. The purple and scarlet is the royalty or prosperity of people. The precious stones and pearls were all marks of somebody with great material wealth. And it also shows you that her fornication has brought in a lot of prosperity. She's been very prosperous in this harlotry and this fornication that she's caused the kings of the earth to get drunk off of, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But notice she has a golden cup full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. She has this golden cup in her hand, and what is it filled with? It's filled with abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. Now, we read a lot about golden cups and cups in the Bible, and just a few references. Babylon, and notice that word was. That wasn't in the original language. If you have a New King James, you'll know that it's italicized. It's implied because Babylon is no longer. So the translator decided that, well, Babylon is no longer a country, so she was. But you have to understand that God, that's not what God was saying. God was saying, Babylon, a golden cup in the Lord's hands that made all the earth drunk. The nations drank her wine, therefore the nations are deranged. And we'll come back to that. What are they drunk on? What is the fornication? What is the harlotry? We're building something here. The Bible points all the pictures to this, but it's the reason why the world is being judged. The world's being judged for rejecting God, rejecting the gospel of Jesus Christ, and for persecuting his people, the Jewish people, that have now just at the end of the tribulation, are now putting their faith and trust, leaving Babylon, that system, and fleeing to the place of Petra, where they're hidden and protected, and places around the earth until the end of the tribulation period. But the whole world, they're drunk on this fornication, and the nations, therefore, and Babylon was the beginning of it all. And that's what we'll talk about here in a minute. But Psalm 75:8 says, "For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup, and the wine is red, it is fully mixed, and he pours it out. Surely its dregs shall all the wicked of the earth drain and drink down." Now, if you remember earlier in Revelation that it said that God had poured out it was time for the harvest of the earth, and that they were all drunk from the wine of fornication, but also the judgment of the cup. The cups are always speaking of judgment. God is pouring it out onto the world in judgment. It's being drunk by the kings of the earth, the judgment of the Lord coming. Babylon was a gold cup in the hand used by God to spread this around the world for those that would reject God. It's the origin of it. And also Jeremiah 25:15, "For thus says the Lord God of Israel to me, take this wine cup of fury from my hand and cause all the nations whom I send to drink it." It's interesting. Jeremiah was given a cup, said, "Hey, go take it to all these different nations that you prophesy." And Jeremiah prophesied the future judgment on all the nations of the world that would happen in the end of the tribulation period. And so some very interesting stuff. And we'll come back to a lot of Jeremiah 51 and 52, 50 and 51, when we get farther into this. But today we're just going to continue to look, and we're going to touch on, and we'll come back to over the next couple weeks, is Revelation chapter 17:5, Revelation 17:5. Speaking of this woman riding this beast, it says, "On her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth." This is the New King James Version, which I use, but it's actually a bad translation. A good translation of what's going on there is, I don't care for the New Living Translation, especially for a lot of prophetic passages. They don't do much justice on some passages. They really harm some of them from what they truly say in the original. But for this verse, the New Living Translation does a good job. And it says, "A mysterious name was written on her forehead, Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities of the world." And so that's what we see. She has a name written on her forehead, and it's a mysterious name, because that's what I mean, and the angel's going to define it for us, so we don't have to worry. And that's one of the nice things about some of the things in Revelation is with the things in 17, everything is described for us in the rest of the chapter, and we'll go over that we'll start it on the next episode that we watch. But notice it's mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world. Here we go again with the harlotries that the kings of the earth have drunk, the cup full of fornications. Notice that the sexual promiscuity is that this woman is Babylon the Great, who is the mother of all these prostitutes and harlotries and all of those. The cup was full of wine that the kings have drank, and they were drunk off her fornication. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but let's look at and just finish up the thought in verse 6 before we kind of define some things. And that is in verse 6, "I saw this woman, she was drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." So we see the saints probably speaking of the Jewish people and those that have died in Jesus, throughout all history. That's what this is talking about. This isn't talking about just the ones that died during the tribulation period. Those are being remembered by God too. We already seen that earlier in the book of Revelation, but we need to go back, and he's marveling with great amazement. And of course, the angel's going to come back, and we'll see that next time. But all of this being drunk with, and the wine of her fornication and the harlotry, we have to ask ourselves, what's that mean? What does God mean when he's talking about a woman that is drunk on harlotries? What does he mean? Is he talking about just, people paying for sex? Is this sexual immorality? Is that all this is? Again, we have to go back to the Old Testament, and all through the Old Testament, we're told what harlotry to God is. And that we find a good example of that in the book of Hosea. Hosea was a prophet to the nation of Israel. And the first 3 chapters are Hosea actually going and taking a wife who was a harlot and having children by her. And then she goes back out to her harlotry, and God has Hosea go and find her in the midst of her harlotry and take her back in, as God is using that as an example of what Israel was doing. And then he starts to describe it in the prophetic message from chapter 4 on. And in chapter 4, verses 11 through 12, it says, harlotry, wine and new wine enslave the heart. That's true. That's just a basic principle we understand of sin, right? But is there a deeper meaning to it? My people ask counsel from their wooden idols, false religions, right? And their staff informs them. They use these are all the different religions they had in the land where they went. And for the spirit of harlotry has caused them to stray, and they have played the harlot against their God. They offer sacrifices on the mountaintops and burn incense on the hills under oaks, poplars, and terebinths, because their shade is good. Therefore your daughters, the daughters of Israel, commit harlotry, and your brides commit adultery. So we get a picture there that Israel, what was their problem? It wasn't the fact that they, people don't understand, this wasn't their bad attitude. It wasn't their addiction problems. It wasn't their anger issues. It wasn't their immorality that God was upset with. He said harlotry, wine, and new wine, they enslave the heart. We already know that. There's a problem with sin there, okay? And it's sinful, right? But the main problem that God had with Israel had nothing to do with that. It had to do with their loyalty towards the God who is their own God. They were going after other gods. And of course, there was sinful practices mixed into all of that. We don't need to get into the incense that they burned on the high places, and the children that they sacrificed, and the sexual perversion they did around these groves. We already talked about that. That is a given, right? But the point is, though, is that those activities drew them in to worshiping other gods and thinking that they could still worship God. They were two-timing God, basically. They were prostituting themselves to other gods and goddesses. And that was the problem. That was their problem. God had already provided a way for all of their moral sins to be dealt with the sacrificial system. The law took care of that and made them right before his God, so that they could come with the fellowship offering and worship the God that has loved them and redeemed them and cared for them. But they chose to go after other gods. And that's a problem with today. People say there's all these different ways to God. And so we find that if the Bible defines it, so when we read Revelation 17, 1 through 6, what do we discover? We discover the truth, that Babylon is the mother of all false religions. False religions, trying to find any other way to God besides Jesus Christ, is harlotry according to God. That's how he sees it. And so Babylon the Great, which we understand we went back to the time of Nimrod, is where all of these religious systems started. And they've been passed down to cultures and societies. The names have changed, but the spirit behind them is the same, and it is the mother harlot. She is the mother, and all of the daughters are all the false religious system. See, a lot of people looked at a lot of people say that, and a lot of commentaries from the Reformation point to this woman being the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is not the woman here. The Catholic Church is a daughter of the woman. The woman is Babylon the Great, the city of Babylon where it all started. It is the spirit behind it. The king of Babylon is Satan himself. And the woman she's drunk off of all these people that have went and sought after and built religious systems to try to find their way to God without God. And we see plenty of that in the world today. Well, we already went through this a little bit, and as we're finishing up today, let's talk about that. Let's build our case. What do we see happening in the history of the world? We already went through the sins of Israel and their different gods and goddesses, and we're going to focus mostly on goddesses because this is a woman. She's the mother of all false religious systems. Do we see it going down? Now, remember, we just read one of the harlotries of Israel was Asherah, the Asherah poles, the groves that they were in. Remember, we went through this earlier. She's the Semitic goddess of sexuality, mother of gods, and wife of Baal. 3 forms. She's an idol, a pillar, and a tree trunk, and it's too pornographic to show. Of course, where did she come from? She's from the Semitic, but she came from the Sumerian gods, which were the Sumerian queen of heaven. She's Sumerian, which is the area of Babylon. She's the goddess of the sky, fertility, and guess what? She's the mother of all gods, the mother of all false religions. So we actually see this woman being from Babylon, where it began, is this queen of heaven, which is the mother of all the gods and false religions. So this woman this mysterious name, the mother, the harlotry, is where did it all begin? It all began in Babylon. See, that God is remembering where it all began. And all the problems of mankind started in the city of Babylon. And because after the flood, God promised not to flood the world again, and he tried to scatter them, but Nimrod had already infected the cultures of the world with this religious systems that had been passed down from people to people. Because remember, after the Queen of Heaven came, and this is a name that's in the Bible, and one of the reasons why God had to judge Judah, because they were sacrificing to Tammuz. And that's an Akkadian, which again is a Sumerian god from Babylon of fertility dating back to the earliest of times, and is supposed to be another mother of different gods. Some of the ancient cultures have that language in them. But fast forwarding to now, I mean, what we talked about, what people say the woman is the woman is the Catholic Church. Well, no, the Catholic Church is one of her daughters. And how do we know? Something that has passed down through history that we don't have time to tie in all the different woman and baby religions, but we'll deal with 2. And that is, of course, the Catholic Church, the worship of Mary and the Christ child. She is the co-redemptress. She's supposed to be it's an immaculate conception, that she was sinless and that never had another child, which we know the Bible doesn't teach. But this Mary worship and the worship of the Christ child, the people that say the Hail Marys, this all comes from Babylon. Remember, from Pergamum to Babylon to Rome. And it shouldn't surprise us that the Catholic Church picked it up, because it's a false religious system that this woman, that Babylon the Great is, the name on her head, she is one of the daughters of this mother of all the world's false religions. And so a lot of people still A lot of Bible teachers and prophecy teachers still say that the Catholic Church is going to be the false prophet, and a lot of this stuff it comes from the Reformation time when the Catholic Church was persecuting the church, and it for the times it made sense, but we've gone past that time, and we see the Catholic Church now appealing to all gods. But what is the thing that people are drunk on today? Because remember, we saw in Zechariah that this woman was in a basket that dealt with commerce, and she's wealthy. She's gotten rich. What is the thing that everybody is worshiping today? They don't want God, but they need to save Mother Earth. It's the Mother Earth. Notice this is Gaia. This is the picture that you will find on all of their websites and all of the climate places. This is what they worship, and it is witchcraft, you guys. It is Wiccan witchcraft, and it is, and it comes from Babylon. It is the Mother Earth, and now Earth is the baby that we are to worship. It's Gaia worship, actually, is what it is. Gaia is just another name for the same spirit that went from the Queen of Heaven all the way down to now, but it's saved the climate. We got to save Mother Earth. We got to get to save Mother Earth. And notice though that all of the climate stuff. Look at all the money that is being made from the junk solar initiatives. The all of this money that the countries and the IMF are pouring out for countries to go green. And it's a lot of people are getting rich and getting drunk off of carbon tax. And they don't really care about the environment. They're using it as a control and power to bring in the one world, to bring in the beast system. This woman is riding on the beast system right now to bring about a global government by saving the earth. And we see it happening, and it shouldn't surprise us that God is going to remember because of all these things that happen. But, we see it in various areas right now. We see the world religions coming together to save the earth. We see the church in apostasy with it. This is a big thing, and I've been reading Megan Bichon's book, Shepherds for Sale, and this is the stuff that they're pushing on the church. They have leftists that are teaching pastors how to love their neighbor and care for the children and protect God's creation. It's called creation care. And we have to, and that is getting on board with the whole climate thing and getting people in the church to be climate activists because we need to care for the planet. And it is all based upon evolutionary science, which is anti-biblical and denying what Jesus said, what God said, that there would be summer and winter as long as the earth was here. And so it is anti-biblical, and we know that all of these things are apostate in nature, so the church is buying into it. And then we see pictures like this that tell us that all the world religions are getting together to save the earth. They have all of these different religions, and you can even see the pentagram, Wiccans and Christians and Islam and Judaism, and we're all one big happy family. And then this one here, can the religions of the world save us, or maybe just lend a hand? And it's like they're holding up the planet Earth. And then this is what's happening, you guys, this week at the Summit of the Future includes faith leaders. And I love how they're all wearing masks in this picture. But this is the WHO and Religions for Peace Global Conference. They do this every year, strengthening national response to health emergencies, WHO, religious leaders, faith-based organizations, faith communities, and national governments. It's all part of the UN, and there's people like Rick Warren and these apostate liberal pastors that are going over there with Klaus Schwab and joining this creation care, and we need to come together and hold hands as one world, and it's just like the Bible said, but it's all being the false religious system and the false prophet that's going to get the world to worship the beast at the midpoint of the tribulation period. At the 7-year treaty mark will be when all of the world religions will come together, riding this beast into world peace. we see it already coming together. So to answer our question, is it figurative of a system? It's figurative of a system that started in a literal literal city. So it's a system, but it's a city. Is it literal or is it figurative? And I say yes, it's both. It's a city, but it's also a system that started in a city that God is remembering. And remember, we talked about that before last time, about the pride of Satan, and in his pride in the Antichrist, to thumb his nose up to God, he's going to go and say, I'm setting up my kingdom, the headquarters in Babylon, between the seas and we'll talk about that another time. But you get the point. But do we see this warned about in Scripture? We'll leave you today with 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. These are the false religious systems that this whore, this mother of Babylon, she is the mother of all the harlotries and all the harlots and those that have been drunk off of her wine. These are deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons that we all worship the same God. Speaking lies and hypocrisy. These are all lies. We see apostate, notice, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron. Forbidding to marry, that's the gender madness, you guys. There it is right there. We don't need we shouldn't, that's forbidding to marry. I mean, marriage between one man and one woman. It's the gender madness. That's all part of this one world religious save the earth lie. And commanding to abstain from foods, which is literally meats. That's to eat bugs to save Mother Earth. Hey, we didn't really figure that one out till recently, that they need to get rid of all the cows to save the planet, the Gaia worship, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. So we can see this already happening. They're departing from the true faith of the Word of God, the truth of God's Word, and following after harlots and getting involved in harlotry. And even the apostate church today is adding to the worship of God. They're worshiping philosophy, they're worshiping psychology, they're worshiping humanism, and they're worshiping Mother Earth by getting involved in this creation care that they're saying they're doing. And it's all a doctrine of demons. And many of them are speaking lies and hypocrisy. They tell you that they're telling you the truth when they know what they're saying is a lie. And it's really a shame. And it's just showing you where we are at in history today. We are living at that time right before this system. It's already being built. It's already there, just waiting for the 10-nation confederacy, the world power, the Antichrist kingdom to form. So this woman is already there. All she needs to do is get on the beast and ride into the tribulation period. But as we'll see, this false religious system, this thing that the Pope is saying, that we're all religions are the path to God, is all the lie that this woman is birthed and is going to ride in on this global government that's going to lead to the Antichrist making himself to be God and causing the world to reject their gods and come and worship him. That is the destruction of the woman that we see at the end of chapter 17. So, like I said, if you've been watching this, you've been following along, and you don't have a relationship with Christ, I'm telling you, don't mess around. Time is short. We are going to be out of here real soon. And you do not want to be left behind to face this time period known as the 70th week of Daniel, or the day of the Lord, which will be, Jesus said it, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. The first 4 seals, a quarter of the population is killed, and then in the middle of the trumpets, another third. That means half of the population dead before the midpoint of the tribulation period. And if you can't follow Christ today by simply placing your faith and trust in him, allowing yourself to become born again through faith and trust in the finished work of Jesus on the cross, as simple as that is today, are you going to be able to do it when somebody puts a gun to your head or says off with your head because you won't take the mark? It doesn't take rocket science to think that you'd be better off doing it now while it's simply placing your faith and trust in him. So do it today. Don't be left behind. For the rest of us, remember to look up and know that your redemption draws near, because that is our blessed hope. We aren't tired of it. We don't get burnout. We're excited as we see these things come to pass. We know that we're one blink, one breath away from being with Jesus for all eternity. And that should keep you going through all of the days of darkness that we're in. And so thank you for watching. God bless you, and we'll see you next time in Maranatha. If you have been blessed by this podcast, please subscribe and share to help get the word out in these last days. If you'd like more information or to contact us, please go to calvarysolidground.com. God bless you, and see you next time on Apologetics and Prophecy.